By the way, I got the tweet out for the...
W.R. Hart sounding off.
Mm-hmm. William, perhaps?
I actually do have something that I think might would be an interesting, question from what was discussed. Okay, first off, those people are freaking nuts. I want to say that first and foremost. They legalized a date rape roofie as an advertisement as a sex like helper. How did they really like do this the same way they did in the US with like depressants and whatnot?
I don't know about depressants or other pharmaceutical cases like this, but yeah, they took something that is effectively a date rape drug, and they marketed
did they,
it
like,
as a female libido pill.
Yeah, but did they like advertise it that way, like the way like commercials on like depression are, where they have like actual advertising budgets for like
yes,
over...
yes. Of course, yes. The company that produced this drug did have a marketing department, and the marketing was focused heavily on evening the score, so to speak, on making this a gender issue. We're finally going to give women a pill for their sexual freedom.
Okay, and they did that for like their BS. We got to destroy these like scientific tent poles for like really established, theories and things that we teach at a very fundamental level.
Well, where the company was concerned, I think their motive was more fairly straightforward. They just wanted to sell this drug. They wanted to make a profit off of it, the way pharmaceutical companies do. The part where the gender Lysenkoism comes in is where the National Organization of Women and the advocacy of this Vanderbilt professor came into play. This is where feminist epistemology and feminist criticisms of science were deployed in service of pushing this and pressuring the FDA to approve of it.
They need a meteor fucking bone to bite on, because that's a really messed up thing to legitimize in search of like... I mean, the only thing I can think of, like, their ultimate goal is like scientific politics credibility. Like that seems to be the only thing they're actually after. Does that sound accurate?
Basically, they just want the authority to legitimize some set of theories as true and another set of theories as not true. In their eyes, the function of the scientific enterprise is not to acquire truth. Science is a political tool. The function of science is to convince people of what is true and what is not true, not to actually discover what is true and not true.
The really fucked up part about like the whole labeling of these people as the far left, their allies ultimately in these academic circles and the political people they have connections with are more related to people like Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden than people like Yang and Bernie Sanders, or that sector that get labeled as the far left. Like, if you want to talk about like, it's a weird label.
Yeah, I did mention the cynical alliance that they have with these corporate interests in the academy, and in this case with a pharmaceutical company. But there is actually also a connection with young Earth creationism. You may recall in 2005, I believe, that it was the famous trial of Doe versus Kitzmiller, where it was the intelligent design trial. Do we all remember that?
Oh yeah.
Yes, I've seen clips.
Okay, so one of the people who was called to the stand and who defended creationism or intelligent design under oath was Steve Fuller, who holds the Augusta Comte Chair at the University of Warwick. And he's a sociologist, and he's part of this new Lysenkoist business. He actually personally debated Alan Sokal in the first Science Wars. He's a key player in this game. And he defended intelligent design on the kinds of grounds that I'm describing here, that you have these paradigms in place, and the only reason why Darwinism is excluding intelligent design is because there's this naturalistic bias, and that's the current paradigm. That's what's in fashion right now. And in the interest of exploring more theory space, in the interest of having a more inclusive science, we have to include intelligent design into the curriculum.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, that was it. I guess he's politically on the left, but here he is helping this far right interest, this young Earth creationist interest.
Well, to me, it seems like when it comes to people who are very embedded into the establishment, however that manifests to you, because like whoever the establishment is, like if you were asked to like define that, it's going to vary from person to person to one degree. It's kind of a vague concept, because we don't have like the papers. We don't have all of their bank records. We don't see the shit behind the scenes that like could clearly define what the establishment is, because they keep it all behind the curtain. Like they do that, but behind all of the bullshit of like how much Democrats and Republicans hate each other, the real extreme fringes, the creationists and the radical feminists who are trying to break down like certain tent poles of science for like linguistic reasons. Like that theory shouldn't be taught in schools because it has a male genderized name. Like how fucking dumb do you have to be? How unserious of a person are you to really argue that?
Well, they think that language fundamentally is what constructs our perception of reality, that all inequalities are fundamentally due to the manner in which our language categorizes things. If we only change the name of things, if we only remove stereotypes, if we only remove our implicit bias.
The ultimate goal of that, like we're gonna start in academia. We're gonna blaze a trail in politics, and then we're gonna demolish the Spanish, Italian, and French languages because those sons of bitches need to go down. Like that's the ultimate goal for these people if you follow that frame of logic, because genderization has just been too embedded for that to be the real problem here. Like you're not gonna fix that. You can't like. Then you're just going to look racist as fuck because we got to get rid of Spanish now. We can't be having that genderized shit. Like, then who's side? Who are you going to get for you?
Well, the theory they're subscribing to is fundamentally contradicted to a language like Russian, for example. I'm a native Russian speaker, and the Russian language has three genders. It has a masculine gender, a feminine gender, and a neutral gender. And if they were correct, then we would expect Russian-speaking nations to be very tolerant, more tolerant than the West is, of trans identities and of non-binary identities. But anyone with even a rudimentary understanding of how Russia treats its LGBT community will know this is bullshit. So evidently there's a disconnect here between their theories about how language creates our perceptions of reality and how that has knock-on effects on our politics versus what's actually going on. But like I said, they're not responsive to their worldviews are not responsive to evidence. They're doing God's work, and it doesn't really matter what contradictory evidence there is.
And that's kind of on both sides. But yeah, go ahead.
I was going to do just a quick little question here. So how much of this particular mindset, this new Lysenkoism. How much of that is spilling into modern politics and culture?
Politics and culture, not so much. But you do see it in journalism to some degree. You certainly see it in the education system. If you see my Twitter, you'll see an entire feed full of retweets of these curricula and syllabi that contain this nonsense. And of course, you see it in the academy, and you'll probably see more nonsense like what happened with the FDA. I'm certain of it. These people are not going to relax. They're not going to stop. They're just going to continue doubling down.
Yeah.
I actually there was one comment. There was some pushback from this on the GDC, and so I wanted to bring it up here because I actually tend to share that a bit. Before we do, я слышал, чтобы ты говоришь русский язык из России?
Я не родился в России, я родился в Лос-Анджелес, но моя мать от Петрозаводска и мой отец от Припять.
Am I the only one who thinks Russian's kind of hot?
Поэтому это почему я говорю по-испански тоже. Это был по-испански. Spanish was my first language for the exact same reason. All right, well, cool. Just had to ask. So the thing that we had pushback from, and I'm hoping that my mic is working now. It wasn't working at the. Nobody could hear. Nobody could hear me in the. You guys could hear me, but they couldn't actually hear me down. It wasn't sending the thing, so hopefully they can hear me. You had said when talking about Afro mathematics, and I had a hard time differentiating between that as maybe as the examples you gave, at least, between something that's sort of people are arguing for a different system versus really just good education techniques. I mean, when I'm teaching, one of the things I do is I try to find a way to connect with my students, and part of that has to be finding something that's culturally relevant to them. I teach high school, and whenever I'm teaching a class, I always try to find ways to connect with them. So it sounded more like the examples, at least you were giving, was an example of that, which I wouldn't necessarily object to.
Yeah, this part in and of itself is not a terrible thing. What I find dubious is this idea that it's an emancipatory version of mathematics that's going to teach people to be tolerant at the same time that it's teaching them to do math. You see similar material coming from creationists. I'm not even kidding. There's a creationist mathematics book where you, instead of connecting it to their demographics and making, teaching lessons about tolerance, it's teaching lessons about creation and how great God is and blah 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 blah. It's just conferring ideology. But there are more extreme examples. You had back in the day, not so much these days, but back in the 80s, you had what were called the melanin scholars, who believed that black people have, there's no other way to describe it, magic powers because of the melanin in their bodies, and that white colonialist science had erased the achievements of black people. And as an example of this, I talk about this in the Science Wars introduction video. There was, I don't remember the name of this African tribe that was in the West. I think it was the Dongo. I might be mispronouncing it, but it was alleged by one of these melanin scholars that black people had discovered centuries before the development of reflective telescopes, centuries before Kepler and Newton. They had discovered a binary star system. They knew the shapes of stars, and they knew that what were the orbital periods of these stars around each other, and they were able to see that with their naked eye. They were able to see with their naked eye what telescopes today have a difficult time resolving, and that made it into some textbooks back in the 90s. I don't know if it's still there, but that was part of the same intellectual tradition.
We also have a quick change of subject. Steve McRae is in the live chat, and he has requested that we let you know first that just to pass along his well wishes, and that he's going to be in Los Angeles. Oh God, when? I'm not your secretary, Mr. McRae. He's going to be in Los Angeles coming up soon, and he wants to get together with you for a beer. So if you are interested in a good lecture on what is the answer to 6 divided by 2 times 3, fun times ahead.
Oh, that alone is reason enough for me to stay far away from Steve. Steve, once you come to LA, I'm leaving for China. If this is what you're bringing. By the way, my associate Blue Horizons wants to come into the chat. Why don't we let her in?
All right, Dave should be listening, and or Kitty, if someone could get hold of Dave. And
can they go to the Discord? I can pass them the link, or tweet at me.
Or King Crocoduck, you can send them the link, and we'll approve them if you just use the link we gave you, or just copy it off your browser.
Sure. All right, I'll send it to.
And while you're doing that, I actually have a question for you.
Sure.
So, for any of our viewers that really aren't familiar with you, what is it that got you to start making YouTube videos, and where'd you get the name?
Okay, so the name part is easier to answer. Whatchamacallit. So we all know about Kirk Cameron's Crocoduck, right?
I
think we all do, but there might be some people who don't.
I mean, yes, I know, but let's explain it for the audience. Yeah.
So Kirk Cameron, the ex-child actor and born-again evangelical Christian, went on TV with Ray Comfort and insisted that evolution is wrong because we have never found a crocoduck. Blue Horizons is in, so you can go ahead and let her in. But whatchamacallit? Yeah, so I decided to become King Crocoduck because of the alliteration and because I thought that it would be good for marketing. You know, everybody has to have a character. This was back in the day when people were still making characters, and you know, I figured I'd be able to sell merchandise with, you know, like stuffed crocoducks with crowns, and it would be like cute and get people's attention, and I'd make some money. I've never made money off of that, but it's never too late to start.
You know what? Just for that, I'm going to find some time and I'm going to hand sew you a Crocoduck plushie.
Thank you.
Like, I'm going to make it a thing.
Excellent. I'll cut you in for 15%.
Sounds perfect. All right, what was the other? Now, did you get the link to your friend? I'm sorry, who was it that you were trying to get in?
Blue Horizons. She's in the Discord. I can't get the link to her because my computer is stupid.
Oh, yeah, well, so is mine. I got a Windows updated
I'm not sure if they have
lost everything.
Be careful. You don't want to piss off your future robot overlords.
Yeah, I know. It's Alexa. I have Alexa, and it's always listening. It's always recording. As soon as we're gonna have on Landon Knoll, and I'm sure he's gonna educate us on how Microsoft, Google, and all these guys are listening to everything we do. Oh, and YouTube too, of course. Yeah.
I'm going to let Blue in as soon as they pop into the voice waiting room. I don't see them on there unless they have a different username.
All right. Well, for those of you who haven't, if you've just joined us, you know, we are actually painfully close to 1,000 subs, and it would be nice if we could hit that. I don't think we're in necessarily a rush, but if you haven't liked or subscribed yet and you want to do that, that would be absolutely marvelous. Also, there are links to the super chat in the channel, or sorry, in the description. But quite frankly, you know, no need to super chat. You can always just come on in and say hi to King Crocoduck or pass up your questions. Like I said, I thought now the one that I thought was interesting. So the tribe. Now, it was said that they had seen a star, and this was before the invention of the telescope, and the reporting of that was post hoc, so it was well after any expedition had returned. So it sounds like that was basically rewritten.
Hello, there you go.
Yeah, it was made up by
There you
some
go. You
explorers.
should have a direct message with a link to the.
Hello.
Hi there. Hello. I see. I can never tell. Everyone just ignores me, so I can't tell whether my mic is out or it's just, you know.
Oh, I can hear you. Just I can hear a lot of people all talking.
Well, I heard someone. Oh, I think she got booted or.
But yeah, I heard someone say hello, and then it went quiet.
Mm-hmm.
As Nick lamented the fact that nobody loves him.
Yeah, I know. It's. I'm sad, but hey, you know, I can
forever alone.
I can speak Russian on you know, impromptu if I have to, and you know, so at least I got one or two hidden
Hey,
talents.
you never know, that could come in handy one day.
Yeah, well, I was in Russia. I was one of the last people ever to leave the Soviet Union. I was one of the last 12 Americans in the Soviet Union, and I was also one of the first Americans to get shot trying to leave the Soviet Union over a misunderstanding of how much you're supposed to bribe customs officials. But that was another. That was.
That's a big goof right there.
Yeah, no. Well, the goof was I didn't bribe them enough. I sort of thought that, you know, I didn't realize that, you know. You know, I'm an American.
I see them. Blue Horizons just joined the hangout. I just saw their name come up.
Blue Horizons, you have to unmute yourself.
Hello?
Hello.
All right, fantastic.
Now we can hear you.
I was a little bit paranoid I'd have the mic on and I'd instantly like self-dox myself, so I was being a little bit cautious over here. But I made it.
Welcome.
All right. Thank you. This is my first time using Discord, so and on a completely new operating system that I recently installed, so this is quite a jungle to navigate. Anyway, I've got some questions that I'd like to kind of prompt later on whenever we have time. I hope that we'd be able to answer, but you guys can kind of chat about whatever as long as.
Oh no! Go ahead and ask your questions, please. This is that's sure. What this time is for.
Fantastic. All right. So the first one I kind of had was addressing KC of the privatization of science, as well as the quote-unquote delegitimization or the devaluation of a degree. And I was kind of curious. I'm still kind of interested in the future prospects of that because I interpreted that as being seemingly in a negative light, and I was just wondering. I think that might perhaps I'd like to propose that it might make the economy more efficient because maybe in this sense it'd be able to show that people are more competent and they're able to demonstrate their competency over and over again without having a degree to back up some sort of ethos. And let's see, I was curious as to how that could affect research that isn't particularly economically useful, such as, I don't know, like paleontology or something. And I was wondering if fields like that would be able to survive in the future with the kind of extinction of the academics in the future. So
okay, it's a good question, and you're hitting the nail on the head.
Oh, really?
I should tell you, you are cutting out a little bit. So I don't know if that's because the room is too full or there's something sideways with your mic.
Sorry, I'm a little bit far from my mic. Can you hear me now?
Much better.
I hear you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're right. Fundamentally, if research does get privatized fully, then whatever is going to be economically feasible is what people are going to be able to pursue. Because scientists have to eat too, right?
Yeah.
And it helps with the science if you're not starving to death.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay. So projects like nuclear fusion that'll continue to get private funding. Geoengineering, petroleum geology. Oil companies will continue making use of those. Let me think. What else? The climate research will the need for it will probably increase as time goes on. So that there will be a market for that. But things like paleontology, things like astronomy and theoretical physics, you can expect, at least in this country, if the universities do die and everything becomes completely privatized, you can expect there's going to be very little funding for that and very little room to engage in that kind of research.
I see. Interesting. I've also had another question regarding theoretical physics, a little neg that you pointed out about computer simulations, which I think is tangentially related to my previous question, because I think that I picked up on a little bit of spite on computer simulations, as you mentioned, which
You're cutting out still. It's really
I hear her fine. Yeah. Are you sure it's not on your end?
People complain about my latency, so it's might just be me. Anyway, if you want me to repeat myself, I totally can. But my underlying question was that what's the issue with using computer simulations if most physics, especially theoretical physics, from what I've read, is programmed onto a computer and played out that way? Shouldn't things like this be more emphasized over like pulleys and simple machines?
To some degree, sure, but if let's say you get to circuit building, to a lab where you're supposed to investigate the relationship between current and voltage, resistance, transformers, things of this nature. If you don't have experience with building the circuit with your hands, then when the time comes in industry to actually start putting these circuits together and moving on to digital stuff with circuit boards, you're not going to be prepared if you've only ever done it on a computer. You've got to do the work with your hands. You got to know how to
the hands-on
op amps, things of that nature. These aren't things you can just do on the computer. It's negotiable, I'll grant you, for things like bouncing springs and swinging pendulums, but not so much as you move on to other stuff.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, because to an extent it is kind of constrained, and there's kind of a set outcome that you can see, and you don't really have as much freedom to create your own experiments, yada yada. But I don't know, I still am myself, I'm a pretty big advocate for computer simulation, and I think that it's very interesting to talk about. So
no, computer programming definitely has its place. I do think that a lot of physics students are poorly served by their programs because they don't have a mathematical physics course or a computational physics course as part of the course requirements. They don't have courses that require them to engage in modeling or learn how to use things like Python, which is really big in the industry. So there's definitely a place for computer and physics. I would go so far as to say that if you don't know how to program in physics, then you'd better be an incredible mathematician, because otherwise you haven't really got a career in front of you. Like if you can find the eigen.
Go ahead and finish. Well, I have a follow up to that if you're interested, real quick, as far as that way of doing education. I mean, would you advocate for doing something like community centers that do physics demonstrations the same way that we do like baking classes now, or something along those lines?
Sure, but people will only come to the interesting stuff like Tesla coils shooting lightning, and maybe a guy showing that if you put a knife on a pendulum, he puts the knife in front of his face, he lets go, and he shows that because of the air friction, the knife is not going to stab him when the pendulum comes around. Stunts like that will be interesting. But if it's boring shit like bouncing springs and electric circuits, no one's going to attend.
But
well, I mean, I do think that depends on if you like attach
a paper mache volcano. Everybody.
I mean, if you attach like an actual you go to this class and you go to these demonstrations, you learn this thing, you learn about this way, and that actually has you actually mark that down as something important that person did to understand physics better.
The thing is, they have to do it. It can't just be demonstrated for them. They have to know how to build these things, and that's right now what at least my department is trying to phase out. They're trying to computerize it so that they don't have to pay for people to teach these courses. And I think
Yeah,
I think
that's
the
really
wrong approach.
unfortunate.
Automation is a thing. It's happening.
Yeah.
Here's a question.
Well, it just go ahead, guys. I already have fun.
There's a place for automation, and I think that if it's implemented in this manner, where it's so easy to cheat, where students don't even have to do the lab, they just have to click some algorithm of buttons in order to the program effectively becomes a diploma mill.
Yeah, and that you got to avoid that. I've seen some interesting stuff being worked on for like education using things like VR. That's pretty interesting. Like there's some stuff that's being worked on that seems good, but you don't want.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not a Luddite. I'm not.
All right, I apologize. It appears like we had a technical. We got disconnected. We'll be connected back again in 1 second.
So here's the question I actually had for you though is, so of the people that are pushing these ideologies that you find harmful, ultimately, if you disregard the harm for a moment, do you think that there is any good that could come from sort of this alternate approach? And whatever that is, do you think that there is a better way to achieve it?
No, I don't think that it's even going to achieve the goal that it ostensibly wants to achieve, which is namely greater emancipatory potential and more people from different backgrounds, women and people of color, entering the sciences. You don't enter the sciences because somebody who looks like you is a scientist. You enter the sciences and you stay in the sciences. This is especially important because you love the subject. You have, and of course, loving the subject entails suffering for it. You have to suffer through the math. You have to suffer through the physics, through the programming, through whatever it is. If you're not suffering, if you're not willing to suffer that, then you don't really love the subject. And if you don't really love the subject, then you shouldn't be in it. It's not. Fundamentally, it's not about whether people look like you, whether people historically in your demographic have participated. It's about, do you love the subject? And this is something that people of this ideology fundamentally don't understand. Also, there's the minor fact that if you've starved to death under a Lysenkoist-inspired famine, you can't do science because you're dead.
Yeah, it's really interesting how you mentioned that, Casey, with the demographic thing, because I think that for me personally, as much as I figured that I've built some sort of mental resistance to succumbing to these kind of thoughts, I think that inevitably they just happen to happen, and they can off-throw someone very, very badly, and they can create someone to create these complexes around them. For example, For example, like when I started taking physics and math courses that were kind of like above my peers, I'd look around and like it was common where I'd be kind of the only white girl in like a group of Asian and Indian people. And, I don't mean this in a racist way at all, because at first it kind of threw me off a little bit. And, at first I kind of developed some sort of inferiority complex where it'd create, oh, is this some sort of systemic bias against me where I cannot perform as well as other people? And then I realized that I'm performing this some sort of exact kind of thought process that's going to only impede me in later on, trying to like do things later on. So I think that these sort of things can be reflected in any sort of person's perspective, and that minorities kind of exist in all sorts of regions, and it's a real personal thing, that the way a person can choose to interpret things, because in the end there really is no I guess specific way a person can kind of I was at a loss of words. Basically, there's nothing like an underlying systemic bias, because different people have different conflicting experiences, I'd like to say. So yeah.
Yeah, I do agree. I think there's definitely a psychosocial complex at play, and it can manifest differently in different people. That's true.
I mean, to be fair though, if you train an entire group of people to sort of look through an oppression lens, then they're going to see oppression everywhere. Or if you train a group of people to look for microaggressions, they're going to, start seeing patterns that aren't there. People are very prone to that.
When all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yep.
Well, so I had a question. There are so many things that people
Okay,
are.
well, that was some dead air.
Okay, so
Wait,
going back to
do I not have a mic?
Privatization, can't talk today, of science.
I
Can
want to
you
interrupt for a
see
second. Can you
any?
guys hear? Oh, okay. I know I was talking, but my mic was muted. I got booted from the room, and then my mic was dead when I came back. So, never mind. Please continue, Kitty. I apologize.
It's fine, honey. Okay, so with the privatization of science, can you see any real positives other than weeding out, the things that you were discussing earlier, where you would actually be able to prove that things work in, order to go on and, there are obviously the drawbacks of the impact it'll have on universities and on sciences that don't have an economical gain. But can you see any positives other than the one that you mentioned earlier?
Well, the private sector certainly pays more. I functioned at a plasma nuclear reactor, at a nuclear fusion reactor. I was interning there for about a year while I was getting my master's degree, and it was just an intern position, but it paid me $22 an hour. That's not even a full position. It wasn't even. It was almost full time, but it wasn't quite full time. And that's for an intern position. That's pretty damn good. If I had chosen to stay with the company and gone on to a junior scientist position, I could be making probably with a master's degree anywhere between $80,000 and $90,000 a year, and I'm not even 25 yet. So in the private sector, you certainly make a lot more money than you do in academia. I get paid shit to teach, but you got to do what you got to do.
So
Masters and sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's a slight change in topic. So if you were on the same topic, follow up on that. Otherwise, I'll.
No, it was more just lamenting any of us here that are older than 25 and don't have a master's.
I do actually have a follow-up on that after Kitty's done.
Please.
Okay. So if things are getting privatized, what do you think the dynamic will be as far as privatizing results? Because that's something that's super beneficial in the current academia, that when people are studying real science and not doing the semantic bullshit for political power, they're like, when people are really doing science right, it's also very transparent and very open, and results get shared and cross-pollination happens. But with companies doing it, then competition kicks in possibly a negative way. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, they're going to be constant privatization. In addition to sciences that are not economically profitable being sidelined, the ones that are profitable will not necessarily be done quite as effectively, quite as transparently, and I want to say perhaps even honestly, as they would in the public sector. When I was working for this company, the dirty little secret was that we're not going to get nuclear fusion in our lifetimes. But we convince the investors that there's a possibility, there's a real possibility of it. You tell them the truth, that there's an $18 trillion market that they can invest in and get massive returns for them and for theirs. And you get venture capitalists paying hundreds of millions of dollars to subsidize these experiments. Which are basically there for academics who want to make more money to make more money and to pursue their academic research and to build their careers with these publications that they make as a result of their experiments.
So you think,
there's going to be a lot more dishonesty at the point. You lie to the investors in nuclear fusion. You tell them that nuclear fusion is only 25 years away. It's only 30 years away. We're getting there. We have these milestones, very achievable, very minor milestones that we're meeting every quarter, and you should keep on giving us your money because it'll definitely be returned within your lifetime. It's bullshit. Nuclear fusion is not 25 years away. It's not even X number of years away. It's not correct to think of nuclear fusion being a certain.
Sorry to interrupt. Okay.
Yeah, I'm curious. Like, what about some of the people?
I was going to say that. I mean, is
Hold on. Blue Horizons first.
Oh, okay.
Blue.
I think she's muted.
No, I can.
1 second.
There we go.
Oh, there she is.
And we lost her again.
Hello?
Yeah. Oh,
no,
there she is.
We can hear you. Testing. Can you hear us?
Okay, I can see that her thing is making noise, but I can't hear anything she's saying.
I can hear her, but I don't think she can hear me.
Yeah.
All right. Well, while she sorts that out, Dave, why don't you ask a question, and then hopefully she'll be sorted.
Yeah. Hopefully the delay isn't there. Yeah. What is your thoughts on like places like Lockheed Martin and whatnot with Skunk Works working on their little mini fusion device and whatnot that they claim is so close to being working?
It's bullshit. It's bullshit. This is just what you tell to the investors in order to have them subsidize you. You know, it's not like I was saying. It's not even correct to think about nuclear fusion being X number of years away. You have to think about it in terms of dollars. Nuclear fusion is not X number of years away. It's $800 billion away. If you could channel those $800 billion over the course of the next, say, 5 years, then fine. Maybe you could have nuclear fusion within our lifetimes. But let's be real. Who's holding the purse strings? Who's going to be investing that amount of money? It's just not going to happen. People are going to be making these claims. We're so close to nuclear fusion. There's been a major stab. Blah 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 blah. Again, it's just PR. It's just what you tell the investors to get money. And yeah.
So do you think should there be a way to regulate this, like to regulate people from sort of predatory science claim investment Ponzi?
I've never heard of predatory science, but yeah.
It seems unlikely because they would be able to claim that it's their intellectual property and they're allowed to disclose whatever aspect of their intellectual property they want, as long as they're not actually harming people. You can make the defense, okay, we're not making any promises that it's going to be here in 25 years. We're saying it might be here in 25 years. We're achieving these milestones. We're telling the truth. We are achieving these milestones. We are moving towards nuclear fusion. We just aren't being completely upfront in terms of what the actual dollar amount is and what the likelihood of it appearing within our lifetime is. But other than that, we're telling the complete and total truth. It's technically not fraud.
So why do you think that it's a dollar barrier versus a knowledge barrier? Like that there couldn't be some sort of breakthrough discovery that, you know what I mean?
No, anything is possible, but in terms of the actual barriers that are in the way, the engineering and physics barriers that are preventing us from sustaining and capturing and making use of nuclear fusion, once you do the calculations and you add up the dimes and dollars that are needed to develop the adequate materials to have the correct facilities and to be able to address these problems, that number adds up to about $800 billion. And this is the quote that nuclear physicists, nuclear engineers are going to give you behind closed doors. They're not going to tell this to you if you're an investor.
Interesting.
Isn't that a really fine ethical line to walk, though? I mean, you may not be committing fraud, but
it's not fraud, but
yeah,
look, this is the private sector. It's a lot more cutthroat than the public sector. This is one of the drawbacks of privatizing science. There's a lot less transparency. People are a lot less honest.
So that seems like a part of where advancements are being made, where it would really just be a better idea to, make this a publicly funded thing, so you don't have venture capitalists who are just, have a lot of money but don't actually know enough. Like, they could do the research and find out exactly what you're saying right now, and know that this is a bad investment that'll never pay off for them.
Yeah, but in order to be able to do that research, they have to take a 4-year college degree in engineering or physics, and then after that probably some grad school to understand fundamentally.
But they could ask somebody like you. We're finding out about it right now. They could get actual input from honest people if they wanted.
How do they know it's honest people? How do they know
As far as they're concerned, as far as you're concerned, I'm just some guy on the internet. For all you know, I could be the plumber. Maybe I don't know any physics. The reality is you're going to have people who want to make money. Like I said, industry pays a lot, and you have comfortable lifestyles and very tenuous ethical obligations often. And in order to sustain the kind of lifestyle that they have, there are going to be PhDs who are happy to mislead people who they're going to be saying, "Oh, this guy's just so pessimistic. This is not in the spirit of science. Imagine if scientists think like King Crocoduck did, we would never make any progress." Things of that sort. And if you've already.
The honest take, in my opinion, is that this is worth doing so that we can get there, but this shouldn't be something people are investing in instead of trying to find like private solutions to real problems right now, other than nuclear fusion, where there's actually going to be a payoff. Like, that's kind of my thing. Like, the reason why it's public money, or should be, is because we just all acknowledge that there's not going to be a payoff in, a time frame that would be good for private money and investors.
That's exactly my point. Once you privatize the scientific enterprise in this manner, this kind of chicanery becomes much more common. Blue Horizons, can you talk now? Let's hear you talk. All right, I hear you.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to mention that this is very common in many industries. Like 99% of startups in tech, at least, or even outside of tech, I think maybe there be a subset, but a good amount of startups end up kind of disintegrating and having zero payoff. So it is very common in the business world for investors to just kind of throw money in the hopes that something happens. Like, just go on Y Combinator and you'll see these things all the time. There's startups for this, there's startups for quantum computers, all sorts of wacky things that it's pretty commonplace. So nuclear fusion isn't really particularly different. I don't think we should shine a particular light on it specifically, because this is fairly commonplace, especially in things like cloud computing or blockchain technology. So, in the defense of nuclear fusion, it's not as dirty of a game as it's being played out as of now, in my opinion.
Well, I would say that it's a good anecdotal evidence of a broader problem that needs to be addressed. And the reason that it's a broader problem is that there just isn't enough public investment into these scientific pursuits, in my opinion.
Okay. So what if we were to take the analogy, and I see where you're coming from, but I'm just kind of speculating, but we could take the analogy of natural selection, where so many species die, evolution keeps making these issues, and we don't really know where nature, in this case, I'm anthropomorphizing here, but there's 99% error, and like 1% of the mistakes actually end up leading to something. And then the payoff to that is it kind of negates all the other mistakes in the past. So if we manage to kind of tell a few lies here and there at the expense of some sort of, potential explosions of quote-unquote innovation and progress, why shouldn't we just throw money at things? Because there are investors.
No, we should throw money publicly.
So.
That's my point. I think we should throw money at it, but I think it should be publicly funded money, because you can throw a lot more publicly funded money at this than private investors do.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. Because when you look at our military budget and compare that to what we're spending on science, it's ass backwards. There's no other way to describe that.
Well, putting that off to the side, you can look at pharmaceutical companies as well, and the kind of chicanery that they get up to, as with this Addy pill that I was telling you all about. this
And they
sort
don't
of
even
thing, it happened.
throw money. They don't even throw their own money in development and research like the way they used to. It's a lot of public money in that shit that they get their grubby little hands on and screw
But there
people out
are
of
a
their
lot of
investment.
private grants. There are a lot of private investors, and they
There's a
fundamentally
lot, but
okay,
they
my
do a lot
point.
of BS. That's my point.
Yeah, and
Go on.
Listen,
Let King Crocoduck
let him
finish his point, please.
No,
my point is fundamentally when you decide to privatize science, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have privatized science. Of course we should. I'm just saying that it needs to be supplemented by what we have in the public sphere. You're in the public sphere. You have more transparency, you have more openness, you have a more open dialogue, but it comes at the expense of the amount that you're able to actually pay the people who are participating, and that might that probably comes at the expense of a certain amount of talent. It may well be the case that the most talented people are found in industry where they're going to make the most money, and slightly less talented, but nevertheless very talented people are found in the academy. On the flip side, in the private sector, you have these perverse incentives to engage in the kind of chicanery that I'm describing, but at the same time, you have greater potential for innovation because there's private money being thrown at it, and you have the incentivization. Money talks. Money gets things done. So all I'm saying is there's a balance, and if that balance is upset via the death of the university and the complete privatization or near complete privatization of science, you're going to see a lot of this sort of thing in the future, a lot more of it than you see right now. And I do think that openness and transparency in the scientific enterprise broadly is a good thing, not just for the purposes of being good to your investors, but for the public trust generally.
Well, for the public trust and also cross-pollination, because you get when you have all of these ideas that are in the public sphere, and people know about them, they're able to study about them, they're able to hear about them from colleagues who may have interest in other topics. Like, you get a cross-pollination where you discover more things, because the thing about science that's different than the natural selection metaphor is that there is a pathway of things that are possible and not possible. In natural selection, it just leads to whatever happened, but it's not like it was predestined to be that way.
Well, I think the natural selection analogy is actually apt, because there exists a certain set of boundary conditions, namely what's possible and what's not possible, and this is what guides scientific development. And you can compare the amount of money that gets thrown at a project to the rate of mutations, and that's sort of the gas pedal, and then the steering wheel, the natural selection, that's dictated by what's possible versus what's selected for. So I do agree with that analogy. I think it's a good analogy.
Well, I think it. Well, I do think it's good in some ways, but what I was saying about it was that when you look at like the scientific method and what scientists are trying to discover, and like the pathways that are available in the discovery and the pursuit of new knowledge, it's an actual pathway. Like, it exists. It's just we don't know about it yet. With like species, it's anything could happen. Like that is more like what our business structure is. But when you're trying to actually find these new things that we don't know, they already exist. We just don't know about them yet. Does that make any sense?
Sure. Are there any final remarks on this point before we move on to the next thing? We've been lingering on this for some time.
Yeah, I think we have
one more. I have one more quick question for you, and that's: do you think that there should be changes made to patent law?
That's probably more in Nicholas Lamar Souter's department, since he did legal philosophy.
Yeah, and I that is a tough one for a number of reasons, and I'm probably not prepared to get involved in that right now on the show. I did have another question for you, though. There are a lot of very important topics in science right now. For example, the anti-vax problem. I mean, that's a serious problem. There are a number of people who are involved in education. I assume that that's important to you, but that doesn't seem to be of the where the rubber meets the road in terms of society and education versus science. That doesn't appear to be where you've really taken up your interests. So what I would like to know is why this topic? What is it about this that interests you, and why you spend so much time on this one? What interests you about it?
It's a good question. Fundamentally, it's because of my interest in the philosophy of science, seeing it abused in this manner, my trust in the academy, and my idealization of what the academy should be and what kind of scholarship should be admitted by the academy. Because I'm biased. I'm an academic. I want the academy to do well. I don't want it to die. I don't want this kind of nonsense to pervade in it. And also, there's something visceral. There's something really just nasty about standpoint epistemology. Something. I was educated within a scientific tradition. I was educated within a tradition that basically says that if you work hard enough, if you try hard enough, you have the capacity to understand anything. And along comes this epistemology, and it basically says, no, you can never understand this. You have the wrong skin color. You have the wrong set of genitals. I just find that repugnant. Yeah, I find that repugnant at a visceral level, and if for no other reason, these new Lysenkoists need to fucking go just for creating this abomination of an epistemology.
All right. Well, I do think that that's probably a good note to end on. So, unless anyone else has anything specific, what I think I'd like to do is, first of all, thank you, King Crocoduck, both for coming on and for staying for the after show. I really appreciate it. I think it was a marvelous after show. So, thank you. I would like to also. I would also like to point out that Thursday we are going to have a discussion on impeachment and the proceedings that are underway, and the, at this point, very strong likelihood that there will in fact be an impeachment of President Trump. And so we're going to have on a number of special guests for that. That will be this Thursday. And then a week from Thursday, we will be having Aaron Ra on, and we will be discussing in some detail his deconversion story and what got him from a believer to an atheist. So I do hope you guys will join us for that. And I think, let's see here, I am just... No, I think we're good. So, yeah, we're good. So thank you all very much for joining us, and I do look forward to seeing you guys on Thursday for our discussion. Have a good
evening.
Thank
Have a good one.
Yes. Thank you for letting me in as well. Appreciate that.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for...
Nice meeting you, Blue.
Thank you guys for coming.
Yeah,
glad to be here too.